Hey folks, welcome back to the channel, and as we continue our roster mania discussion, we have now landed on Eternal Fire as they have added Joda to their team in place of Calyx to kick things off for 2025. Now, I have heard Joda's name pronounced as Joda, I've also heard it pronounced Joda and Yada, so unfortunately I'm not 100% sure which one is correct. I am just going to use Joda for this video because that's the one I've heard the most. But if I have that one wrong, I do apologize. But I'm going to kind of kick things off by talking a little bit about Eternal Fire first. Then we'll talk a little bit about Joda, and then we'll kind of wrap it all up in the end and kind of give you my take on the move itself. But to kind of kick things off with Eternal Fire, this 5 has been playing together since May of 2023, prior to dropping Calyx for Joda. And obviously some of these guys have played together in the past. Some of these guys go deeper than that, from the Turkish scene. They have had their histories together on previous versions of Eternal Fire. And so it goes back further than that. But if we're just looking at this set 5 with Wicadia and with everything else, again, been together since the middle of 2023. So a very long time together. And obviously, the year didn't start that great when you look at Katowice, but they were able to get a top 8 finish at the first CS2 major at Copenhagen, and they did so by doing really well in the opening stage. They quickly went 2-0 by beating Mongols in Pain, lost their first best of 3 to Heroic, but then beat Gamer Legion to go through 3-1 to the main stage. Once there, they were able to get wins over Vitality and FaZe in the BO1s, their only loss being to Mousesports on Vertigo, a very good Vertigo team at that time. And then they wound up 2-1 VP to make it to the playoffs, so another 3-1 run from Eternal Fire here, and they ultimately lost to Na'Vi in the quarterfinals 0-2, one of the maps being in overtime though, and obviously Na'Vi went on to win that major, so very, very good run from Eternal Fire there, and at this point they had kind of propelled themselves into a top 10 ranking discussion and really stayed the top 10 for the bulk of the year in many people's eyes, and at times were ranked even as high as 7th or 6th place depending on who you ask. I'm not sure if they ever got that high in the official Valve rankings, but from HLTV rankings and I think just in the general mindset of the community, they were certainly a pretty consistent top 10 team, and I would say certainly top 8 team throughout really the course of 2024. Now, it is to be said that they did have a little bit of a downturn after the Copenhagen major, making it feel like maybe that was a little bit of an anomaly. Their EPL season 19 didn't go so hot. They also had a couple other lands that didn't go so well, particularly they weren't able to make it to the main event at Cologne, losing in the play-in to Complexity and Mongols after beating Falcons. But they quickly bounced back after some of those rough runs, at the Bet Boom Dhaka Belgrade number 2 LAN. They actually were able to come second place at that event, beating Heroic, Furia, and Pain, as well as Mousesports, and ultimately just losing to Spirit 0-3 in a best of 5 in the grand final. So really nice little comeback there for them, and they followed it up with another big second place finish at EPL season 20, where they were able to beat Mongols, beat Vitality, beat Maiden Brazil, and then go 2-3 in a best of 5 against Na'Vi, a team at the time that was considered the best in the world, a major champion, had made 6 finals in a row. This was, of course, one of those finals and one of the 3 that they won in that 6 finals run. So Eternal Fire certainly putting up some noise in that regard. Now, it is worth noting that Rio, they didn't do so hot because they lost the opening best of 1 to Astralis, but they did beat G2 in a best of 3 after that and ultimately just got knocked out by Mongols. So kind of iffy at Rio because they had the cool best of 3 win over G2. Of course, that was one of the few events that G2 really just kind of didn't have anything happen for them. So a little bit back and forth on that one. But then after that, they really didn't finish the year very well. Again, after having these great second place finishes at the Bet Boom event and at the EPL event, they go into the Challengers Katowice event. So not, IM Katowice, but, the Challengers kind of took over the DreamHack Open name. And there they wound up, losing to Bait twice to go 5th, 6th. So not even making the semifinals of a Challengers event, which is pretty tough considering the caliber team that they were supposed to be. And then they were unable to progress from the European RMR into the major at Shanghai. And again, this is a team that had just placed top 8 at the previous major, and again, had some second place finishes in some sizable tournaments against good opposition. And here at this European RMR, they wound up winning their opening best of 1 against Aurora, but then they lost to 3D Max, solid team, lost to Sashi, okay team, and then they lost to Astralis, which was in that weird situation where, Astralis is coming in with Cadian, just recently becoming the IGL. He was supposed to be a rifling IGL with Device opping, but Device couldn't make this major due to health reasons, so they had to bring Bro back, and it was a very mixed thing. So that should have been a big opportunity for Eternal Fire to get that win and stay in the mix and potentially make it at least the opening stage of the major, but they crashed and burned, and that is a big problem. And obviously, again, a lot of great results, and obviously, had some maps that they were quite good on. Anubis was a really high mark for them. Inferno was a very good high mark for them. They were capable of playing Vertigo. It is worth noting that their nuke was a bit hit or miss, and same with their DusT too, and they didn't play Ancient, one of the few teams that don't. So they had some discrepancies in their map pool. They also had 3 pretty powerful maps, and they at least were capable of playing, Nuke, even though their record wasn't overall that great. Obviously, they were really propelled by the star talent that was Xantares, even though he's, I guess, an older player in comparison to a lot of the field. This dude was one of the best entry fraggers in the world throughout the course of the year. This guy was taking over 30% of the opening duels on the T side with a well over 50% success rate. At times it was as high as 56%, even at really large lands, and never really dropped below 50%. And really the only other players that had this level of success being an entry fragger were essentially Donk, who is the #1 player in the world for 2024. So that you're basically putting a company with him. And then the other names you would put in that would be maybe like Malbs, Elige, Ziwu, Nico. Really not too many other names I can really think of that you would really put in that list as far as like entry fraggers who were taking such a high amount of opening duels and having so much success. And even some of those ones that I named that were having high success, like let's say, someone like Ziwu, for instance, he wasn't taking 30% opening duels. He was more in like the 20 to 25% range, depending on the map, where he would sometimes be like more of a hybrid with an AK. So really, the only people who were up there as far as taking that level of opening attempts was basically Donk, Xantares, Malbs, Elige, maybe Senzu at times from Mongols was kind of up there, Flames, obviously from Vitality, and then like Xershin and Insani. I think Insani was like one of the more underrated entry fraggers on that list. Definitely very good. But no, Xantares was definitely cream of the crop entry fragger. I'm trying to think where I would put him. I mean, it would definitely be under Donk, obviously. I'm not sure if I'd put him right next to Malbs, like 2A, 2B, like Malbs and Xantares kind of share in that, or if I would put Flames above them. Xershin at times could be, but I feel like on the stage, sometimes he would kind of fall apart where Xantares wouldn't. So, I mean, I think, Xantares probably top 3 entry fragger for 2024, probably. So, yeah, insane level of talent when it came to that slot, no doubt about it. Obviously, Voxic really came into his own as a primary opper, particularly the second half of the year, and became a true second star to Xantares to give this team the firepower they needed to get some of those second place finishes that we were discussing. And then you had Wakadia, who was kind of a young gun that came from the academy team, but joined the main team kind of late in 2023. Didn't really have a whole lot of experience other than playing on the academy team, like in the We Play Academy League back in like 2022, maybe some other events with the academy team. Prior to that, I think maybe he played on a couple other small Turkish teams, but nothing really notable. And when he was playing in the Academy League, he was like, 16, 17 years old. And so he joins this Eternal Fire, main team in late 2023. And really 2024 was like basically his kind of rookie season as far as playing consistent Tier 1 CS. And at times, he definitely looked like he had a load of talent, but there were obviously times where he struggled a little bit, and you feel like a lot of that's just kind of growing pains of stepping up to Tier 1. Obviously, not every rookie can be a prodigy like Donk. Even Zontix, that was his rookie year in 2024 as well, and he never really could obviously match Donk, but I'd probably put him above Wakadia, to be honest. So still a strong rookie, though, for the most part. I think he has a lot of room to grow, and so we'll see how that goes. And then obviously, Calyx is a player that Joda's coming in for, and he was an okay player, more of a, passive extremity player and side anchor. Decent, lots of experience, definitely wasn't necessarily bad by any stretch of the imagination. I wouldn't call him a terrible player or anything like that. I think this move we'll kind of get to with this is that Joda just represents an opportunity to perhaps bring on like an additional star talent, because you have Xantares and Voxic who seem to be very consistent stars, particularly Xantares, but it's like Wakadia is still kind of finding himself, whether or not he's going to be like a third star of this team or whether or not he's just going to be like a solid strong rifle. But Joda could be that third star. He could be that guy that gives this team that additional firepower that Calyx couldn't really provide to really push them over the edge and give them something stronger, with obviously Major continuing on to be just kind of the Entry Fragging / IGL the team. Obviously, his main focus is being the leader, but sometimes he'll go in first. Obviously, Xanter's taking the majority of the opening duels, but Major would probably be second on the list, and at times would go in to set Xanteris up. And decent IGL, in my opinion. I feel like this, while their map pool wasn't as well-rounded as I would have liked it to been, again, they were really top-heavy on like 3 maps to really rely upon for success. When you watch them play from the eye test, they seem to have a pretty good mix of being able to play default, be able to bring in pacing changes, throw in some set pieces. They seem like a pretty well-balanced team. I wouldn't put them up there as tactically strong as obviously like a Navi or a Mouse Sports or a Vitality or something along those lines, but I mean, I think it could be argued that tactically speaking, they were probably better than what Snacks was calling for G2. I think you could probably make that argument. Outside of that, I'm not really sure, where else you'd go with it. As far as like, tactically speaking, who were they better than? Who was better than them? Obviously FaZe, you'd rank above them as well. Mongols, I'd rank above them. Even what Kixon was doing with Heroic, I'd probably rank above what Major was doing with Eternal Fire. But still, all in all, a pretty solid team when tactically speaking. And so the problem was that they just hit some bumps in the road at the end. And so it makes sense that they would look to maybe try to make an upgrade, maybe bring in someone fresh, someone who had some fire to them, someone who's looking for something more, and see if that could maybe rejuvenate them in a way. Because Joda obviously comes from playing with the Eternal Fire Academy team in his own right. He'd been around since 2022. I'm pretty sure he overlapped at times with Wicadia on the Eternal Fire Academy team, if I'm not mistaken. Very little experience outside of that Academy team, similar to Wicadia. But when Wicadia got pulled up to the main team, we actually saw Joda eventually join Sanal kind of early in 2024. And he was probably the best player on that team. I mean, you could make a case for xCloud, but I feel like whenever you actually got to the LANs that they played, which weren't very many, it seemed like Joda was a little bit more consistent, and that may just be because Joda was playing a bit more of a passive role in comparison to xCloud, and so, therefore that might make up some of the discrepancy. But I would still say Joda was, in his own right, a flex rifler, a guy who did play a lot of extremity and anchor roles, so he's kind of a natural fit to replace someone like Calyx. I think he's a little bit more aggressive than Calyx as far as the fact that he would probably go for slightly more opening duels on the T side than Calyx did. Not by a substantial amount, but a slight bit. And even when this guy was playing against, top teams at EPL and the RMRs, he was still at an over 50% success rate on opening attempts on the T side at like a 20% attempt rate, which is pretty damn high. So definitely bump him ahead of Calyx as far as his ability to have success in the opening duels. That's for damn sure. Now, as far as Joda's time on Sanal, I mean, Sanal was a strong team online in Europe, and Joda and xFlow are really kind of the ones leading that charge. They won the last 2 seasons of the ECL for Europe over teams like Sashi and Saul and Amiga, 3D Max, 9 Pandas, Aurora, some of these, tier 2, tier 3 European teams. They had won multiple CCT and RES Europe series, beating teams like Fnatic, NiP, Rare Atom, Bait, Paravision, Passion UA, Monty, some names that you would recognize that were playing in RMRs. And, obviously a team like Passion UA had that crazy run at the major. So they did well there. They did play in one season of EPL that was like kind of one of their main lands that they played. And they actually did get wins over FaZe, FlyQuest, and Heroic early in the season, but then lost later on to those same teams. They did lose to Eternal Fire and Heroic later on. So that was what kind of hurt them, and it kind of knocked them out in 17th to 20th place. But they did well to qualify for the Shanghai RMRs, but just crashed out really quick. They had a win over Rebels, but then lost to Mouse Sports, lost to C9, which those 2 best of ones can be forgiven, honestly. But then they lost to Eklot, which is a real bummer, because I really felt like they were a stronger team. If you kind of compared Eklot to Sanal resume-wise throughout the course of 2024, you would imagine Sanal would be able to step up, because Sanal even looked more impressive online than Passion UA did if you just were looking at pure results. And so the fact that Passion UA was able to go on and have this crazy run and make the major and do these incredible things, it was disappointing that Sanal weren't able to get past the RMR. And I imagine that situation is probably something that allowed Joda to maybe be a little bit more open to looking for a better team as opposed to sticking with Sanal Now, as far as just looking at the exact role for role that he's replacing with Calyx, they didn't really play Anubis on Eternal Fire, so I'm not even really sure if that's worth talking about. But they did technically play the same spot on T side, playing the A lurk or mid support position. Whereas on the CT side, Joda was an A anchor on Sanal that would assist at middle, which is kind of the role that Major played the couple times it did play Ancient. So there would be maybe a little bit of give and take there as far as positions go in that right. On Anubis, Calyx is more of an A extremity player, and then their mid rotator on the CT side, whereas Joda was more of the B extremity player as well as a B anchor on the CT side, which is kind of similar to the role that Wakadia plays now on Eternal Fire on Anubis on the T side, where he was an A anchor, though, defensively. So, again, a little bit of give and take there, probably, but maybe this allows Wakadia to play some of Calyx's roles that he would have been more comfortable playing than Calyx, or maybe Joda will hopefully just be able to be a little bit flexible and play the opposite extremity of Wakadia on a map like Anubis. So we'll just kind of have to see how that plays out. They do play the same position as well on DusT 2. They were both long A players on the T side, but they did play different defensive positions, where, again, Joda more of an anchor on that map, where Wakadia was a B rotator. And then they didn't really play Inferno on Sanal, so that's going to be interesting, because obviously Calyx was an apartments player and A anchor. I'm sure Joda could probably be an A-side anchor with no problem on the CT side, as far as him being able to play apartments and things of that nature on T. Not really sure. Again, that wasn't a map that Sanal really played, so I'd have to kind of wait and see. And then as far as Mirage goes, Joda is essentially a one-for-one for Calyx on that map. He would be the A extremity player when there were defaults being used, and then he was the A-side anchor, same thing that Calyx does. So he's essentially a one-for-one for Calyx on Mirage, and technically Ancient, at least on T side, if we ever see Eternal Fire go to Ancient in their map pool. But then on every other map, there's going to be a little bit of give and take on, perhaps having the pivot Major spot a little bit, or something along those lines. Also worth noting, I guess, I'll add in here at the very end, Vertigo, Joda did play the same spot that Calyx played on the CT side, but Calyx was more of like a mid-hold player, and Major would kind of be the B-lurk on T side, whereas Joda was, I believe, more of like a B-sided player on the T side, kind of similar to what the role Major played. So there's going to be some maps where Joda would probably play the spot that Major plays on the extremities, which means Major will be more at the pack, which is kind of more what you want with an IGL anyway. But there's also maybe just some opportunity for Joda to show some of his flexibility to play some of Calyx's roles and just be a one-for-one guy. Or maybe you see Wakadia pivot around a little bit. Either way, what Eternal Fire is getting with Joda is an extremity player that I believe can be more of a playmaker than what Calyx was able to do. And that's no knock against Calyx. I actually think Calyx is a fine player. Again, this 5 was able to achieve some pretty big results and be a pretty consistent top 10 team in the world, and at times breaking into the top 8 and ranked even as high as 6th. So not too shabby, but obviously they hit a wall when it came to how the year ended. Not really being able to get the finishes they were looking for at Rio, or being able to do anything in Shanghai, getting knocked out at the RMR level, not even making the opening stage of the major. So yes, while they did have a great EPL season, they did have a great, Bet Boom Dachau event, and they did have the top 8 at Copenhagen, there was some rough patches in the midst of some of those events, and then, just not a great finish. So if this team was looking to make an upgrade, make a move, try to bring in like a true potential 3rd star, to kind of help out with Wakadia, while Xantares and Voxic continue to be kind of the leaders of the team as far as star power goes, this is, I think, a good move to make. It shows a sense of agency as opposed to complacency. Yes, they probably could have continued on with Calyx and been a solid team next year, but Joda represents an opportunity to bring in someone with potential to be something greater, and to therefore make the team something greater. And for that, I have to kind of respect them for making a cutthroat move like that. And I do think that Joda was a very promising player on Sanal. I thought he was their best player on a team that was having a lot of success online in Europe. And so this move makes sense, as he, did play their academy system. He's obviously Turkish, so he fits right in. There shouldn't be any like real cultural or language clashes or anything like that. Joda also has had the experience of playing with the international team at Sanal. Maybe he can bring, some of those ideas over. Obviously, Xantares and Voxic have played on international teams as well. But yeah, I do think that this is a solid move, and hopefully this reignites Eternal Fire as a team that could be a contender. Obviously, every time that we are able to have another team become strong, it makes the whole scene better, because we have you know, more teams to watch play great Counter-Strike. So that's what we're kind of looking at with this one, I'm hoping. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, please go ahead and give it a like and also leave a comment below. Also, if you're not subscribed, would appreciate that as well. Catch you on the next one.